What was the earliest memory of you becoming aware of race or racial differences growing up?
I was about 5 years old, and my mother told me that we were black. And I didn't understand that because I colored with crayons and paints, and I didn't know any people that were actually black, and that didn't make any sense to me. And she said, "No, black is not your color, black is your race."
Did your school or neighborhood reflect how much racial or ethnicity diversity during your childhood?
Yes and no. At my school, there were black people, white people, Latinos. There were a few Asians, a few Vietnamese or Southeast Asian refugees, but I would say it was primarily black and white. It was interesting because each grade had two classes, and there was a regular class and there was a gifted class, and most of the white kids were in the gifted classes.
Mm.
So that was interesting.
How did your family talk about race when you were growing up, or did they avoid the topic?
It was spoken all the time because they said that we had a cousin named Jackie Robinson who was the first black baseball player or the first black person to play in the major leagues. So it was talked about a lot because we were told that the general story was we used to be slaves, then we weren't slaves anymore, then we had civil rights, the civil rights movement, and then we got our rights. That was the general narrative, but over time it began to appear that that wasn't quite the case.
Have you ever experienced or witnessed racism directly? If so, how did it affect you?
Unfortunately, I've experienced it on numerous occasions, primarily with police interaction. I've been pulled over by the police so many times I can't even count. We would walk down the street and the police, we're talking about maybe 12 years old, police would stop us, ask us what our names were, write our names down, ask us where we were going. And then, of course, when I was driving and got pulled over, had a gun pulled out on me one time. The police officer said, "Oh, sorry, thought you were somebody else," as if that would have been okay anyway. There are so many stories. We don't have enough time. And when I was 7, I read in the Jet magazine that these police officers raided this house and they ran up in the house and there was a little boy in the house and he was scared, so he hid in the closet. And the police officer opened the closet and shot the kid and killed the kid. And he wasn't charged because the police officer said he was scared. He thought the kid was dangerous or something, and that was just a completely shocking story to me. I was 7 when I read that story. Yeah, and then when I was about
Gotcha.
12, there was this bus driver over by Exposition Park. He wasn't on duty. He was with his family, and he got pulled over, and he ended up getting shot in the back about 8 times. And the police officer said that he attacked him, and they didn't charge the police officer. The police officer got off. They did get sued, and ironically enough, Johnny Cochran was the lawyer who represented the family. Um, and they did sue the city, but nothing happened to the police officer. They actually bought his story that the man attacked him, even though he was shot in the back. And then my next door neighbor, he ended up getting shot by the police. I don't know how many times, 10 times, 15 times, some crazy number of times. And they said he pulled a gun out on him. Pretty much for the most part, um, black people especially know not to be aggressive towards the police. So anyway, so that's just 3 stories. I can go on and on and on and on and on and on.
How did race influence your friendships, dating, or community involvement during your teens and 20s?
Pretty, I would say, adversely. You know, you have racism, you have prejudice because of racism, because of the inequities that we suffer as a result of racism and the economic imbalances we experience. There's this sense of urgency. There's this need to quote unquote stick together. And so growing up, it was kind of frowned upon to have, even though there were like girls in my class, white girls in my class that I liked. Um, as I got older and became a teenager, there was like a push to only date black girls and only end up marrying black girls because you wanted to keep the wealth in the family and all of that. And they talked about how you were a sellout if you got with a white girl. And then, but this was both race and religion. So being in a religion where you're also taught that you have to maintain certain religious beliefs and practices, that did narrow my options in terms of girls that I took seriously as long-term relationships. There was a white girl that I dated in high school. She was really, really nice. I started messing with her because I thought that if I got her pregnant, that my kid would be more white than black. So I had a little self-hate at that point back then. Growing up, being light-skinned black, and of course, being the one in my family with straight hair. Um, there was this feeling of not being black enough. And then if I had a kid by a white woman, then of course my kid's gonna be more white than black. Of course now I obviously don't care about that at all, but back then it literally caused me to not pursue a relationship with a woman who was actually really, 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 really good person and a very um, compatible mate. So that affected me.
Do you remember how people around you reacted to events like the police brutality against Rodney King and the LA riots in 1992?
Yeah, my initial reaction when I first saw it on TV, on videotape, I was actually happy because I was thinking, wow, we finally got him. We finally caught him actually on tape because they've been doing that for years and denying what happened. So I was really happy that we finally got him on tape. That was my reaction. My reaction was like, yeah, we finally got him. And then I remember joking about it like, man, if these people don't get convicted, we're really in trouble. And then I remember I was taking a nap. My father called me. He said, man, they're letting these guys off. And I just went back to sleep. I was like, man, this is crazy. Then I woke up. Then I saw the riots. And that was crazy. And then I saw those dudes pull the white man out the truck just because he happened to be a white, so-called white person driving through a black neighborhood. His name was Reginald Denny. And they pulled him out the truck and beat him down. But the riots were crazy. People talk about how it's crazy like they're destroying their own neighborhood. But then other people were saying, like, what are you talking about? We're destroying our own neighborhood. We don't even own the stuff in our neighborhood. We don't own these stores. We don't own these buildings. But people have to understand that sometimes people who feel like they have no options react in, seemingly irrational ways because that's their only chance to exert some type of power and some type of feel like they have a voice. It's a result. It's something that happens. It's an understandable thing that happens, but and at the same time, not right. But two things can be correct at the same time. I thought it was crazy personally. What can you expect when you brutalize and oppress people for so long? Sometimes the only people that are going to react are the ones who, are more on the edge.
What was your perception of affirmative action policies when they were a bigger part of public debate in the 80s and the 90s?
Well, I remember I had to write an essay about affirmative action, and I read an article about how bad it was. And so when I wrote the essay, I wrote how it was bad, about how, you have people who aren't qualified getting jobs, but that's not what affirmative action is. The reality is that because of the racial structure in this country, obviously not to a person, not on an individual basis, but on a collective basis, when you deny people of certain races and certain ethnicities outright opportunities, when you are racist towards certain groups, the result is you have other people that get jobs that are actually not qualified. just because they're a certain skin type. And affirmative action doesn't mean that you hire people who aren't qualified. It means that you have to give an opportunity to those who are. And affirmative action was effective because you had to give people chances. And diversity is actually better for society. So that was the lie. And it's still a lie, and it's a racist lie, saying that DEI means you hire unqualified people just because they're a certain color.
How did popular media shape your views about different racial or ethnic groups when you were growing up?
Oh, well, you have all these different stereotypes. I mean, you had stereotypes against black people. Like growing up, black people were oftentimes depicted as violent thugs. We were afraid of each other. Black, especially black males, we were afraid of each other. So it made us, it conditioned us to think that black people committed more crimes and were less trustworthy. Um, then you have certain rules and norms about what is black and what is white. People will say if you listen to a certain type of music, oh, you're an Oreo or something, or if you have a certain uh, tone of voice, that you're not black. So those things all contribute towards the way a person behaves and perceives themselves. It's like, for example, um, if you talk about black people have full lips, curly hair, high butts. Okay, that does not that does not extend towards everybody. There's such a range of black people.
Were there particular historical events or movements that changed your views about race or identity?
Well, I mean, growing up, just studying history, we only learned about white people in history. Um, George Washington was the father of the country. He couldn't tell a lie. When he chopped down the cherry tree, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Um, and so we had to go out and look for history on our own. I remember in history class, in world history, the teacher actually skipped the chapter on Africa and slavery. But the books were very skewed. They choose what they want to put in there, and the same thing goes for females also. Like history is pretty much slanted towards what men did. Yeah, so there are like events and coverage of events that influenced me and affected my perception towards race and identity. I remember Ronald Reagan, who I call the first Donald Trump. He's very similar to Donald Trump. He said things. He didn't say things as blatantly as Donald Trump does. He would say stuff about, you know, we have to stop the welfare queens. He was talking about black women, and we have to stop they're taking advantage of the system, and you have these big bucks driving Cadillacs. He was talking about black men, referred to them as bucks, which is like a pejorative term about just a black man just being a physical specimen with no brain, basically.
So that kind of relates to the next question. How did the election of Barack Obama in 2008 affect you or people you knew in terms of attitudes?
There were tears in my eyes when he got elected. I remember when he first was on TV giving a speech. I said, "Oh man, he seems pretty cool. Too bad his name is Barack Obama. Too bad he's a black man named Barack Obama. He'll never go anywhere." And but he was so good. He was so smooth, and his speeches were so good. And the previous president, his ratings were so bad that he won. He was really an awesome candidate to me. And then when he got elected, man, people were crying. And Jesse Jackson tried to become president before that, and Shirley Chisholm tried to become president before that, but that was more of a pipe dream. So yeah, when he got elected, people thought that actually there was like a turning point for the country overall. But then, of course, when Donald Trump got elected, then it's like, yeah, people don't really care about a person being racist. That's not really a big deal.
Do you think that discussions about race are more open today than you were younger? Why or why not?
Um, it depends. Some people are able to have racial discussions, some people aren't. I have a friend that I'm not able to have racial discussions with her at all. She's completely closed off, and she gets really triggered. She doesn't recognize her blind spots. Some white people, just like some men, cannot acknowledge inequities without projecting that on themselves. Like we have people years ago who didn't have any problem owning people as property and beating them and raping them and killing them. And you have people that will defend that practice because they look at that as something they're responsible for. They're not. Like, you're not responsible for what somebody else did to somebody else just because you're a member of the same group, ethnicity, gender, economic structure, religion, whatever. But you have people that do unfortunately identify with those people. And to me, you shouldn't identify with those people at all. You should identify with good people and disassociate yourself, or not identify with people who do bad things. So people get triggered. People aren't able to separate things out. It's unfortunate. So yeah, there are certain people I'm able to talk talk about race with, and there's certain people that I can't. I've reached a point though where I've kind of given up a little bit. So I don't know. I don't know. I think it's just bad for so many people now. Period. So race is still a major issue, but um, there's other issues. Differences between rich and poor, and the cliched haves and have-nots.
How do you see generational differences in how race and ethnicity are talked about between your generation and younger ones?
Well, I think younger generations are way, way, way better. Way, way better. Young kids have always been good. Like, there's like zero racism amongst young kids. Like, little kids don't have racism really. They're taught that by their parents. And racism is always taught. It's not inherited. Um, so you just grow up. You're a kid. You have friends that you like, friends you hang around with, and but then you get a little older, and then you're taught all this stuff in society, and that can result in separations and conflicts, etc. Um, and being taught certain things, and having certain opinions and prejudices. But I don't think it's as bad now for kids in middle school and high school and even grown-ups. Like, obviously interracial relationships are way just, it's not really an issue now anymore, and it used to be an issue. But in general, though, I think the kids today are just way better. Yeah, I think overall kids are more intolerant of intolerance. I think, and kids speak out more for each other now.